Alright, this is going to be part 2, even though it's really part 3. I just don't want to... I tried to read the first part, but it didn't download. I lost connection with the internet, and it's like I read half an hour of my life for nothing. Of course, if you're interested in this story, true story, type into your web browser, what's it called again? It is called Journey Through Islam. I left Islam. Journey Through Islam, by the testimony of a former convert to Islam by the name of Abdul-Quddus. And he'll let you, he's kind of like give you an inside account of what happened when he was a Muslim and how he got out of Islam. Trouble is, he threw the baby out with the bathwater, you know, and became an atheist. But anyway, I'll continue to read what he said. Okay. All right. Okay. Is this thing recording? Let's see here. Yeah. All right. Oh shoot! Every time I bounce back, it. Okay. All right. Okay. Over time, certain individuals were introduced to me that changed the course of my journey. By being a revert, convert, and impressionable, I was vulnerable prey and acquainted with predators. After taking Shahada, I was given many telephone numbers for contacts. The first contact being from a brother named Yusuf, eagerly seeking my attention. Oh crap! I gotta. Okay. All right. Probably my girlfriend calling pretty soon. All right. See, is this? All right. The first contact being from a brother named Yusuf, eager seeking my attendance to reinstate a revert support group dismantled after the founder left the country. I'd encounter numerous brothers attempting to recruit me into their organizations. My hesitation to partake in many activities perhaps saved my life. Yeah, my hesitation to partake in many activities perhaps saved my life. The claims by brothers who left us for quote, Arabic studies or humanitarian work overseas caught my suspicion. Some actually went for jihad. One brother returned very depressed from Qital warfare fighting in Iraq. Yet even with all precautions, the dreadable risk of having quote tea with terrorists supervened. When over a dozen Muslims were arrested on terrorism-related charges, we discovered one suspect was from my close-knit clique of brothers, passing his house hundreds of times while plotting using 3 metric tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. Reverts were wandering sheep that had to be extra cautious of acquaintances. The only way for the non-Muslim to consider Islam was by proving our Quran superseded previous revelations. To establish the immaculacy of the Quran to Christians, it was imperative to expose the fallibility of the Bible. I guess you didn't realize that if you prove the fallibility of the Bible, you prove the Quran to be false, because the Quran says it confirms the previous scriptures, which you find out is the Bible. Once a Christian had encountered inconsistencies in the substructure of his faith, he became more open to the possibility of biblical errancy. Faced with numerous contradictions, Oh, yeah? The keen recipient would be guided to a more agreeable theology found within the Quran, even though the Quran says it confirms previous scriptures, the before scriptures. Yeah. They knew Arabic, so we provided selected material to them. In specific cases where Christianity and or Judaism lacked in subject matter and Islam had the leeway, I took advantage to prove the superiority of the Islamic religion and its honor by staying true to the previous revelations with Abraham, Musa, Moses, or Isa, ibn Maryam, Jesus, son of Mary. To convince atheists and agnostics, we exposed the loopholes in evolution and modern science, presented the finest examples of Islamic creationism, and perhaps mocked their presumption of the universe existing merely by chance. It's not all wrong, hey. Once the non-Muslim was eagerly reading the Quran and Islamic material, I would present Muhammad as a prophet of Allah. He puts God, but no different from the accepted Hebrew prophets. Guilt and fear were common tactics used to pressure the conversion process. Just as the Jews denied Jesus, so did I admonish the Christians for rejecting Muhammad. If they recognized monotheism in Muhammad, I seized the opportunity by recommending the individual to embrace Islam and take the Shahada, declaration of faith. There is no deity but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. As I gained experience as a Muslim, I sought a more literal interpretation of Islam closer to the pristine deen of Prophet Muhammad. Without equivocation, the notorious Yusuf Ali Quran was a translation that pondered the Western liberal values attempting to lure non-Muslims to Islam. Although I used Sayyid Abu al-Madudi's Quranic commentary as a reference, I closely adhered to Muhammad Taqi ud-Din al-Hilali and Muhammad Muhsin Khan's translated work, the Noble Quran, I'll blame word called the Noble Quran, which offered a summarized version including the efforts of At-Tabari, Al-Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, and Al-Bukhari. Tasawwuf, Sufism, and modern progressive movements conniving to reform Islam were not considered the real McCoy, for they presented serious drawbacks and discrepancies that revealed an intentional divergence from Sunnah, the sanctioned practices, sayings, of actions, or actions of Prophet Muhammad. The Saudi-based movement of Salafia, heavily influenced by Ibn Taymiyyah's call to renounce innovation and return to the genuine Islam, seemed to be a visible option. However, concluding that being Muslim was sufficient, I rejected any libels of sectarianism that would subsequently divide the Islamic Ummah. Guidance and companionship. From my brothers in Islam gave me a sense of belonging. Being a revert signified the reversion to a state of fitra, the inherently pure disposition of being a being was created with. Everyone adopted an Islamic first name, shunned music, and only ate halal. We new Muslims delightfully welcomed a brainwashing, since years in kafir, disbelief, ungratefulness to Allah, left us feeling filthy. An unadulterated Islam was difficult for the kafir unbelievers to digest, so deviants evidently had a higher success rate in their propagation of Islam, dawah, as they modified principles to suit their nafs, carnal self, of recipients. The moderate and sanitized version of Islam that initially brought me to conversion had to be reassessed. Through the local mosque, always available was a handshake and anticipated hug. This was a comfort unavailable at home, especially from a mother always unsatisfied with my performance and father unconcerned with my progress. Encouraged by Muslim brothers, I desired to excel in my religion, possibly get married, master the Arabic language, and be a mujahid, partaker in jihad, and shahid, martyr. He viewed contemporary Muslims as crippled by colonization and far adrift from the straight path. In much insecurity and drifting, I found fundamentalism as perdurable, as a perdurable anchor. We romanticized the early generations of pious predecessors and sought to capture their vigor by imitation, to revive the Islamic spirit. For a fresh Renaissance, we propagated a fundamentalist version of Islam to unite Muslims under one refined but exemplary model. Un-Islamic programs such as communism, democracy, socialism, and capitalism were thought as destined for the dustbin. The ideal of freedom was vehemently rejected as implausible. The ideal of freedom was vehemently rejected as implausible, even in a democracy. The latter we ridiculed as democracy. That's kind of good, democracy. The plan we envisioned was a homologous Islamic Ummah comprised of compliant Muslim nations willing to accept the nostalgic ideology, followed by a pan-Islamic government. Funded by Arab petroleum sales, this jihad could be sustained because Muslim countries held approximately 80% of the world's readily accessible reserves of crude oil. This will enable the restoration of the Khalifa and thus usher in Khalifa. The military defeat of an emasculated mujahideen brought about some promising perspective in reformation. Our focus was needed elsewhere besides Chechnya, Kashmir, Mindanao, Patani, Palestine, etc. We chose the alternative frontier in jihad, Islamic dawah, to rectify the decadent affair of present-day Muslims. However, from the very get-go, politicized Islam was a dud that failed to launch. Salaf, pious predecessors of the first three generations of Muslims, of 7th century Islam were far from exemplary, and their ummah was riddled with schism and assassinations. With a religion that advocated jihad and casus belli, it was inevitable to have infighting factions. We had never achieved an Islamic utopia, and without an appropriate method for reformation of Islam, the future seemed not promising without a strategic platform to alleviate the plight of Muslims. Oh, it's still recording. Good. Alright, I'll continue a little bit longer and then I'll stop. With hindsight, I perceived a quintessential factor sustaining my Islamic faith to be fear. I had buckled under the coercion. After embracing the notion of a supreme being, anxiety ensued while receiving admonishment from Allah's book. A substantial amount of ayat, verses, of the Quran are intimidating threats against your personal well-being. Consequently, after departure from the masjid as a new Muslim, I sensed regret and remorse. By taking precautionary action, I had determined the expected value of submission to Allah, overweighing the value of punishment in hellfire or emptiness of non-belief. This erroneous and biased wager sought the necessity of considering Allah for personal convenience without considering the necessity of truth for the sake of truth itself. There lies Pascal's flaw. When emotions took precedence, in dire desperation, I abandoned my cherished opinions and chose to surrender voluntarily as Allah's slave.